Welcome back to my Suggested Topics Mystery Series. Before I dive into the questions, let me just remind you all that I always need more mystery suggestions, so feel free to leave any questions you'd like in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them. Without further ado, let's jump into the questions. Not sure if you made a video on this already, but maybe something on the topic of the Cog promotion theory and what happens to the VP, CJ, CFO, and CEO when they're defeated. I think it's a truly interesting topic, and it's one of the few things I find to be personally canon despite it never being mentioned in Toontown lore that I know of. TTR's Joey did mention it as canon in the TTR storyline, I believe, and I think kind of that gap between level 12 and level 50 Cogs and then promotion to boss Cogs leaves a very nice avenue for potential content development, so I very much like that topic despite it never really being mentioned as a thing that I know of in the original game. Why are the mazes in the back 9 so bad? Good question. I think it's literally because honestly there just wasn't much funding and support going towards the development side of the game at that point, so development was being simplified, leading to one map being the original and then just being duplicated, rearranged, stuck together, and being called a harder maze. It was simply a shortcut through the development of the area. What did the areas near the Cog HQs look like before they took over? Good question. I don't think there was ever a canon for what was there before the Cogs made their HQ there. As far as I could see in the development of Toontown Online, the game always had some sort of Cog HQ in each corner of the map. That being said, there is lore with Toontown rewritten at least saying something like Gyro Gearloose's lab was effectively turned into Cog Nation or some sort of base or something along those lines, so perhaps they were landmarks or important locations of sorts that were eventually taken over. We'll see if any storyline on that ever actually happens in TTR. Where do Cog buildings come from? Again, I don't think this was something that was ever truly covered that I know of, but I think in my mind the most logistical thing is that the silliness in the buildings or in the area gets zapped and the buildings effectively turn into the Cog buildings by being taken over and run by the sad evil robot Cogs. Or you could just picture Cogs moving in and setting up their shop. In the cartoon world, their big business building dropping in right down over the old Toony building. It's a good symbolic, classic cartoon-esque take on it, don't you think? Day and night cycles? Day and night cycles are an interesting concept. I thought maybe there was something planned even just in estates, maybe since you used to be able to find the moon underwater there, based around your own time being reflected in your estate or something like that. But upon asking Jesse Shell, he said he didn't believe they ever had plans for a day and night cycle of sorts. And allowing others to tell what time it is roughly for you might be a bit revealing, so maybe that's not the best idea regardless, so go figure. Toon houses were going to look more like houses with bathrooms and such. Yeah, so here's the thing about Toon houses. They were going to be so much incredibly bigger than they ever were. In fact, let's go over all the conceptual input before we had the final product. First off, they said they were small, but there would be the ability to upgrade and expand them in the future. That was clearly never added. There were supposed to be new games in estates. Nothing like this was ever added until they ported cannons and table games to estates long after that concept had set sail. There's actually a really neat early version of the piggy bank in the 2003 phase files. The top would pop open and there'd be Toon hands inside the jelly beans inside the bank jar that would use this bellow of sorts to essentially pour the jelly beans into your jar. That was eventually simplified, but there are still remnants of this, of both the piggy bank opening and a bare bones version of the hands in bellow animation. They mentioned finishing several house models. There's multiple house models in the 2003 phase files, but they all look relatively similar besides the old house model that they eventually changed, never actually adding the ability to change your house model. There were supposed to be animations to allow you to sit on chairs and couches, and that was never added to estates. Lastly, there were supposed to be buyable fishing piers for your estate, which was obviously changed, and the ability to buy portraits of you and your friends that you could hang up on your wall. Those were also never added. So, to put it bluntly, there's a lot that was scrapped and simplified from estates. Unused animations. Okay, let's go down a list. There was an unused Cog defeat animation where they turn into feet that shrink while walking away. I think it was simply deemed a little too morbid for Toontown. There was also a plan for them to shrink into little clowns and run away, but that was scrapped as well. There's an odd walking animation for the Cogs. Nobody's quite sure about the purpose, maybe like a lured walking animation of some sort. There were a couple of unused Cog battle animations, Song and Dance and Cigar Smoke, the first probably just being too toony, and the second being, on the other hand, too inappropriate for Toontown. There was a taunt animation that was scrapped or Toons, most likely to prevent the unnecessary "you stink" violence it produced. There's a scrapped periscope viewing animation that was supposed to be used for HQs, a pointing animation that I attribute to Tutorial Tom pointing at the flunky, and 2, I believe, gardening animations that were scrapped if I'm not mistaken. An assortment of random, maybe only for testing and somewhat buggy, scrapped or unused doodle animations, and a building animation that was presumably a design concept for making all buildings animated and dancing when the silly meter was released, which was inevitably scrapped. Where do cog parts go when they explode? Good question. I don't think that's ever been discussed clearly, but we always seem to get little bits and pieces like a sprocket here and there, so maybe there's some Toon cleaners that occasionally stroll by to clear up the mess. Or maybe the parts just disappear like a cog building does. TTR lore has a bunch of theoretical particles, maybe some of those get deconstructed upon a cog's explosion. Cog pets. I don't believe I've ever heard of a cog pet, to be honest. It'd be neat to see how that'd work out, but I don't think that's anything more than just a concept. How was the land of Toontown created? Example, one place is dark, while the rest are sunny, one is foggy, and one is snowy. That's just the magic of Toontown. It's a wacky, zany world where limits don't exist. There's no true rhyme or reason to how the world of Toontown works. There's silliness off the charts, and quite frankly, the world of Toontown comes to be just as it is. It's a cartoony, magical world of its own. And just like cartoons, they don't always have to make perfect sense. The hills near MML and Goofy Speedway. Before TTR covered it up with a cloud, there were simply hills added there as a design piece to make the map not look so barren in that area once Goofy Speedway was released, probably due to the fact that they just didn't have any plans to add anything there and wanted to make it look nicer than just plain green texture. Where are estates? I'm not sure, but I do mention it in my video Outside Lands, so go check that out if you'd like. The link would be in the description. Where does Clarabelle live in the catalog? I don't think that's ever mentioned either. That's a good question. As for where Clarabelle is, it's not actually discussed anywhere, but Clarabelle serves as the old-timey operator connecting your call to wherever it needs to go. So while she kind of does sell you things, she kind of is just in some kind of operator room or telephone building or something, but she probably makes the mad jelly bean selling catalog stuff to us anyways. Why don't we see Tutorial Tom and HQ Harry anymore, and where is the tunnel? We see them all the time in the tutorial. They're there for only one reason, to help our new Toons that come to Toontown get acquainted, so they stay in their special area where they teach the Toons and welcome them into Toontown. I don't think there actually has been a lore reason as to where that area is, though, unfortunately, but it is actually something I think about a lot. It's kind of like a weird sub-district of TTC somewhere. It's gotta be somewhere. Scrapped gags. There's a punching glove and a blower model thing in the files. These gags are relics of a time where gags had no tracks yet. There were tons of theoretical gag ideas and they were all just kind of lumped in this giant collection of them. Eventually, it being decided that tracks were the way to go as far as organization instead of a ton of random gags, thus these not having a good track that they fit in and were scrapped. What's under Toon's gloves? That's a good question, but let's answer in a broad sense why Toon gloves exist. First, it's easy to animate. Old-timey cartoons used very simplistic rounded hands and sometimes gloves to ease production. Secondly, Walt Disney himself said he wanted Mickey Mouse to appear more human-like, so they added gloves to him to prevent him from having mouse hands. Third, there's plenty of resources of the Toons taking their gloves off, so we can probably assume there's a normal-looking hand, albeit probably four-fingered, as 4 fingers looked more normal on small cartoon characters, according to Walt Disney. Also, for Toontown, it was probably just much easier to animate and model and rig just having a one-fingered club-shaped glove hand, so that's probably why it came to be that way. The female cogs. I think all there is to it really is that there are several cogs that are just designed to be feminine in nature. Just take a look at their specific cards to get a reference of that. The Ditch and Cellbot HQ. I'm not completely sure of its true intention, but the going theory is that it's the hole that the VP drops into over and over, falling from the top of the Cellbot Tower. However, looking at concept art of Cellbot HQ, it was probably just merely a design choice that kind of naturally developed through the creation of the map. Fluffy's Funny Farm. This is actually fairly well known by now. Watch my original Toontown map video to learn all about that. As far as a doodle playground or a playground run by Fluffy, Jesse Shell mentioned that they had thought about it, but they never developed or progressed on anything like that. Has the CJ been defeated at all, like exploded? I don't think he has. Upon being defeated, he mentions the battle as being a mistrial and for it to be rescheduled, so poor Bumpy Bumblebear has been technically stuck on trial repeatedly for all these years. I'm wondering why Toons don't have tails. Well, while there were supposed to be specific body parts for each species that you could mix and match, I believe they don't have tails for a specific reason. That being, Jesse Shell was noted for having mentioned he hated having to deal with anything hanging off the body such as accessories. The less you have to deal with tails poking out of clothes, how it handles when walking, when sitting on the trolley or carts, or anything like that for the matter, the better. Here's one. How about how Toontown plays into the DuckTales canon? It may have been an offhand cameo, but it's canon that Cogs were a thing Gyro Gearless invented. I think it's really neat. It's definitely a cool callback to Toontown, but I also think it's not necessarily as canon as you'd hope it to be, besides it just kind of being a funny little reference. It's true that DuckTales characters were involved in the lore of Cogs being created, but they were never mentioned afterwards, so I wouldn't read a whole lot into it personally as far as where Toontown fits in the canon of DuckTales. What about the cat in the trash can that you see when you delete a task or a toon? I dubbed Trash Can Cat. Yeah, you know what? We gotta get to the bottom of this. Yeah, it turns out it's just a design choice. It wasn't actually anything specifically inspired, just a design of a toon in a trash can. But you know what? We should make some kind of lore out of that. Somebody work on that. I bid thee. But anyways, I hope all that was interesting for you guys. I tried to answer as much as I possibly could, and I hope you guys feel satisfied. Remember guys, for me to keep doing this, I need all your suggested topics, so keep leaving them for me in the video comments, and I'll get to as many as I can in Suggested Topics 3. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next time in my next video.